A very good morning to you. Welcome to Your World. My name is Olive Barrows, sitting in for Winnie Alubembe. Renee, before we finished AM Live, I was so excited you're here again. The last time we had Renee Ngamo in studio, we're discussing mentorship. And actually, the conversation we're having today has a little bit to do with that, beyond the buzz, and this is about second chances. But we'll get into more detail. First, let me introduce my panelists, Renee Ngamo, who is a global, underline, board member, Amnesty International. Let me toot your horn a little bit.
Thank you.
On your behalf. We also have another lovely lady in studio with us, Teresa Njoroge, founder and CEO, Clean Start Africa. There is a gentleman this time round for this session. So usually on AM Live on Tuesdays, we have an all-female panel. But for your worlds, thank you for representing your gender. We have Maxwell Kihara, and he is chairman Beyond the Bars Conference. So I'll start with you, Teresa.
Okay.
Clean Start. What is that about?
As the name suggests, Clean Start, it offers clean starts to specifically at this particular moment, women, girls, and children who have been impacted by the criminal justice system. And we begin journeying with them right from the correctional institutions, so that's prisons, rehabilitation centers, and support them and equip them to prepare for life post-imprisonment. Our largest interventions begin at the bars, and hence beyond the bars. And that means welcoming them back into society, because there's just so much stigmatization for people coming from prisons, and then just figuring out, how do I rebuild my life? Where do I begin? I've been away, and there's this tag on me of, you know, being an ex-con. So we help them go through those ropes of, this is how you're going to reintegrate back into society, give them community, because Clean Start primarily is run by formerly imprisoned persons. And they are the ones across the country who embrace those who are coming out of prisons, support them with economic empowerment, family, because we've come to realize through the Clean Start organization that social ties contribute to a huge extent to success post-incarceration and reduces recidivism. That's going back into prison in a very great way. So we provide those social ties. So in short, it's an organization that we set up as formerly imprisoned persons to offer the highest rate of success when it comes to reintegration, but also contribute to advocacy and reforms within the criminal justice system. Yeah.
Renee, I know this is an area you're particularly passionate about, because like I mentioned, you were here before the last time and we're discussing mentorship, and over tea after the show, you were really passionate about women and girls and the justice system and how they're treated within that justice system, and how and what then does that mean for their children. But perhaps you could explain to us a little bit why this for you is close to your heart.
Absolutely. And first of all, realize this, that the majority of women who go into prison are not actually a threat to society. If one of the points of prison is to remove people who are threats to or a menace to society from a society, rehabilitate them, and then reintegrate them back into society, we're taking at least 76% of a female population that is in prison that is actually not a menace to society. They're in prison for non-violent, poverty-related, criminalized offenses. What do I mean? Loitering, selling outside of a designated area, hawking. In other words, they are the economic crimes they are the economic activities that they are trying to raise themselves with, to find work, to make a living, that are criminalized either at the county level by the creation of fines or alternatives of jail sentences if they do not pay amounts of money that they would never be able to afford. If you have a license that's at 200 shillings or 300 shillings, and the profit that she's going to make today is at 100 shillings or 200 shillings, there is no way that woman can afford to pay that money, even when a license is 50 shillings. If she's making 200 shillings, you've taken away 25% of the daily earning that she is going to make. Even if she was making 500 shillings, 50 shillings is 10%. Think about the taxes that we pay already. That's an inordinate tax, and it's a tax on poverty. So we're taking women into prison for the sole reason that they are poor and that they cannot have other means of making a living. So what do we then do to stem this problem? Teresa has spoken about advocacy, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. But part of why I was so passionate about this and why we talked about the mentorship before is because when they come out, the prison system is brutal. Any system where you're overcrowded, even in your own home. Think about, if you ever had to share your room with the relatives who had come from shags. It was already a great pain. Now imagine you are restricted, you are stigmatized, and literally everything that you own will likely be taken away from you, apart from the clothes that you came into prison with at the point at which you go through the bars. When they come out, if they are unable to reintegrate, unfortunately, Olive, what we've seen and the research has shown, one of two things will happen if they're not able to reintegrate. Number one, they will now commit the actual crime. There is a crime and a menace to society, so that they can find their way back in, because this is now the only alternative to them. Can you imagine when prison is the only alternative to you? Number two is they will commit suicide. That is exactly what our criminal justice system, unreformed, the unintended consequences thereof, are one of those two. So when we have a community like the one that we have at Clean Start, and I'm really, really proud of these women and the work that we've done, it meets this woman literally at the gate. And sometimes and very often even before she's come out, and says, listen, there's a community. We're waiting for you. We celebrate that you managed to survive this. We're going to find your children and come, and we're going to help you guys to reconcile, because children left on the outside, especially of single mothers without support, will usually have undergone abuse. Imagine coming out, yourself traumatized, to abused children. How do you deal with that? And then say, we're going to find you a little room to stay in, humble, nothing much. But you know what? We'll show you the ropes so we can get back into the market, so you can make some money, get a dignified way of making a living in a community that does not judge you for your own poverty, and that allows you to turn the prison experience not from an identity, ex-convict, like she said, or formerly imprisoned, or mwizi, or jela, but turns that into an experience that says you may have gone through that, but you're more than the sum total of your experiences. And that is why, for me, I'm so passionate about Clean Start Africa and what it does as a model for what we could be doing, not just in prisons, but with any population that is vulnerable.
I mean, when you talked about a tax on poverty, that just blew my mind, to be honest. But Maxwell, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about Beyond the Bars conference.
Fantastic. I really like what my friend Renee is saying about decriminalizing poverty. And I think that's one of the main challenges that we face as a nation, and it's something that can be tackled. Beyond the Bar conference now brings to the table all these stakeholders and players in this space. We've got people like Clean Start, we've got NGOs and organizations in advocacy. We've got the police, we've got the judiciary. We've got you as an individual who would want to participate and help us to criminalize poverty and help these women, like Renee was saying, so that when these children, when these parents are taken into custody, when the mom is taken into custody, this child is not left alone. There must be some responsibility by the government and the community. So Beyond the Bar conference, number one, brings in these women who've worked with Clean Start, over 400 women who have been trained through the Ufunuo system. Teresa talked about receiving this woman with a dignity pack from the moment they get into prison. Because like Renee was saying, some of these stories are very shocking, Olive. You just walk into the street, something happened, a very petty offense, you find yourself locked behind the bars, there's trauma and all this. So, they receive them from that moment, take them through training, and sometimes even, not sometimes, train them even with skills that they can use after, so that we avoid again this scenario of them going back. So we have these women, then now we have the players from this space and these industries where we can participate and talk about how can we make our society a better place to live in, how can we reform some of these laws, because some of these petty offenses, some of these things in the penal code should have been changed way back. they were not meant for us. They were brought in before we got independence for a particular purpose, maybe to harass or to intimidate or to just remove the dignity of the citizens of the country and the indigenous people back then. But those are still some of the laws that we are dealing with, which is not fair. So these are some of the conversations we want to have on this table together and see if we can collaborate and have a better way forward and impact that affects all of us, and we can leave something better to the second and third generation.
Teresa, as Maxwell has stated, I mean, I have visited prisons, and you will find there are programs where they're taught leatherwork or carpentry or whatever tailoring activities. Why is that not enough? Why is it necessary that on release that there is somebody there to receive them, that there is a support system?
That's a very interesting question, because our desire is that the criminal justice actors, the right holders, the duty bearers would ask that question: what is not enough? And from our own experience, it's very clear that the users of the system that has been developed, those who go through that system, and it's common knowledge, the people who are very close to a problem are also very close to the solution. And in more cases than not, and in our case, the people who have been convicted or have been, gone through that prison system and come back to rebuild their lives post-imprisonment, understand the problems and also are very close to the solutions of how we could make that system better. Because prior to other civil society and other organizations coming in, there was very high rates of recidivism. People would come out of prison, and even to date, there are some people who actually do not want to leave prison because of the stigma they will experience on the outside. They have no clue or any idea, how will I rebuild my life post-imprisonment, or come outside and reoffend to come back. So my short answer to that would be, it is not enough because it was not designed with the user in mind appropriately for them to successfully reintegrate back into society. So part of what Beyond the Bars and Clean Start and other key stakeholders want to achieve is all the key players coming on the table and seeing where the gaps are. And most importantly, listening to the voices of those who are using this system and have come up with interventions and innovations that have helped them succeed when they have reintegrated back into society. Because essentially, the essence of the criminal justice system is to ensure there's law, there's order, and society operates in a way that's safe. Now, if those who are purported to be causing harm to society go through the system and are then left out on their own in a way that they do not reintegrate and continue living in society harmoniously, then the criminal justice system is not achieving the very core mandate it's meant to, because they come out back into society and then commit those crimes because they have no means of decent livelihood. Now, we are trying to look for allyship with the criminal justice system, and saying, as Renee has stated, when it comes to petty offenses and offenses that are no harm or danger to society, let's execute non-custodial sentences, number one, so that we don't separate families. Let's execute alternative sentencing and sentencing that's restorative. Let's have a people-centered justice system. For those who truly must go through the criminal justice system, let us ensure that they are ready and prepared for the time they're released back into society. But then when they are released back into society is where the biggest problem comes in. Because remember, they were arrested, went through prosecution, were within the judiciary, and then ended up in the prison. So they've been handed through a conveyor belt within a system from one player to the next. But the day they leave prison, whether it's through power of mercy or any other way, who are they handed over to ensure that they have successfully reintegrated back into society? No one. So on that day, the prison gates open, they come back into society For the women who we work with, 90% single mothers, sole caregiver, has no clue where her children are, and she doesn't know where to begin. It's not like she amassed capital to now go rent a house, start a business. None of that. So the likelihood of them coming back is very high. And so that's why we want to come back and ensure that, yes, you're training me on the skills to do some leather work, to do some tailoring, but there is a gap. In my mind, first and foremost, I am traumatized. Number two, there are innate issues that I go through every single day as I go through this prison sentence. And it doesn't matter what number of skills you give me, because the day I leave here, it's not the skill that will even help me. It's how to first get that job as an ex-con, you know. Number two is how to continue living within a community and a society that is so fearful of me having come out of prison. But I also want to contribute to making this criminal justice system better. So we go back in there to collaborate with the key stakeholders who would allow and listen to us. To even talk to those who are still in there. There's nothing as powerful as a success story. I was in this system, I went through the courts, and I'm now outside here as a success story. Going back to prison, I was through this system, you're now here, and I would like to assure you, my sisters who are here, that this is not the end of the journey. There's a different way we could do life. There's nothing as powerful as a success story. And that's the primary reason why we want to come back and join in allyship with the criminal justice system and look for the alternatives and ways to make this work, because currently it is harming so many families, so many people. We could do it better. That's the reason why. It's not about the tailoring. It's not about that is good, yes, but it's just a drop in the big equation of what will amount to successful reintegration back into society. And that's the gap we want to fill.
All right. So we need to take a break. But when we come back, Renee, and I could feel, I felt you.
It's first hand. So
when we come back, so we'll take a break, but when we come back, are the players in the justice system listening, one? And two, what do you say to those who say women have it easier? They can go back to their mother's house. They perhaps appear less intimidating, so they would have an easier time of things on the other side of this break.
People come to me and they say they get discomfort when they have ice cream. Can you imagine that? Avoiding having cold ice cream. Sensodyne gives you long-lasting protections against sensitivity. And people come in and they're like, oh, it works. I can have ice cream and I'm not in any discomfort. I recommend Sensodyne because it works. It's brilliant.
Praise Atmosphere 2023 on the 9th of December at Sitam Karen, Nairobi from 2 p.m. onward, featuring Evelyn Wanjiru, Prosper Ochimana from Nigeria, Rehema Simfukwe from Tanzania, Edith Wairimo, Celestine Donkor from Ghana, Wilberforce Musioka, Solomon Mukubwa, Kestin Bogo, and Sharon Ishavuka from Kenya. Regular tickets are available for just 1,000 shillings, 2,000 shillings at the gate. Visit www.praiseatmosphere.com/events or use paybill number 800-8575, account Praise.
As are we crossing over?
Considering where we are seeing yields, for example, on government paper going, the question has emerged around the ability by commercial banks to really compete for what have becoming increasingly expensive deposits?
A number of dynamics come into place. There are those larger banks that then use their size to their advantage.
One of the discussions we've been having in this country is around open banking and the prospects it has, what it could unlock in terms of opportunity. Maybe you can just give us some flavor, and maybe someone is even watching and they don't have an idea what open banking would actually mean in this kind of market. Just touch on that.
The only thing that banks then have got to be concerned about is their own safety and security. But once you have covered yourself in terms of safety and security, you can allow the consumer use an interface to be able to access those services in a much more personalized way, if I can use that word.
It feels so fresh, fresh, fresh. Always fresh. Nivea Fresh Deo. Now with new InfiniFresh technology. Antibacterial power with 48-hour protection and long-lasting freshness. Nivea Fresh Deo. Feel fresh in every moment.
Karatina University, the Green Entrepreneurial University, announces the 11th graduation ceremony and the inauguration of the second Vice Chancellor to be held on Friday, 24th November 2023 at the main campus starting 9 a.m. Follow us live on YouTube and Facebook page. For more information, visit the university website www.karu.ac.ke. Karatina University, inspiring innovation and leadership.
All right, welcome back to Your World. We are discussing second chances beyond the bars. Renee, there are the two questions I posed, which is one, are the players in the justice system listening? Because listening to you guys, a majority of women who are incarcerated for non-violent crimes, economic crimes.
Yes.
And you use the term taxing poverty, which I thought was profound. Two, looking at Teresa, I look at Teresa. If you had not told me that you have been through the system, I would have no way of knowing. So do women have it easier? It's argued that perhaps a woman can go back to her mothers.
Okay, so let me tackle the first. One, other players listening, the answer is yes. And it's been a long period of creating and nurturing the relationships that have allowed us to come in through the door. When you have the label of having served a prison sentence, unfortunately, nobody listens to you. In fact, looking through kind of different levels of stigma, you will find that refugees have it. There are organizations organized around refugees, around all sorts of other kind of traumatic situations, the post-war, but not criminal offense. That's the least addressed. And yet for those people who claim to have a religious background, particularly of the Christian faith, there are only four things that you're called to: feed me, clothe me, visit me in hospital, give me succor in prison. Those are the things that we're called to. I don't know a lot about that book, but at least that bit I caught in in Sunday school. But now they are. And we notice that we've been invited to spaces where we weren't before. The National Council on the Administration of Justice, the court users committees. We're being invited this week. We've been invited to go and have a conversation around forensics and evidence gathering, which are new spaces for us as Clean Start Africa, but which are vital spaces because everyone's having a conversation about the criminal justice system, except the majority of the people who go through it, who are the people who, one way or the other, whether or not you're convicted, this is a huge population. And the other stakeholders cannot speak on behalf of these because they have a different stake and a different lens. So good news is, yes, they are listening, and we must do more than listen. It's got to get to the point where we're now seeing the reforms go through Parliament, assent into law, and the policies be implemented by the various stakeholders. So let me speak to the second now, that women have it easier. I love this euphemism, women have it easier. I would love to know when women have it easier and where, because I would love to live in that world. And already I view myself as a privileged woman in the sense that I have an education, I have a profession that I can fall back to. Touch wood, I am healthy and I am well, and therefore I am able to take care of myself. And I have an understanding to navigate a fairly complex system, like a legal system. Let's take a look at the trajectory of a typical girl in the country of Kenya. Number one, if you come from certain communities, from the age of 6, you're being looked on as a potential exchange for the restocking of livestock for your father, which means that from 6, you're likely to be a victim of female genital mutilation so that you could be quickly married off to someone who is a multiplicity of years your age, 40, 30, 50, even a 20-year-old for a 6-year-old. And that then becomes immediately what your value is in that community. You're seen as a liability, not as an asset, because the thinking is, if we educate you, you will get married and they will benefit, they being someone over there, will benefit from your education and not your family of birth. However, if your parents are ill, we're seeing today that it is the women, the sisters in the home that become the primary carers. But even though we've got a law of succession that is very, very robust, we're still seeing a lot of pushback from communities and cultures saying, no, women cannot inherit, and particularly if you are a married woman, the cardinal sin of you having chosen to get married or you having been married off precludes you from wealth. Now, with all of that stacked, add to that uneducated or undereducated, intimate partner violence, or SGBV, sexual and gender-based violence, poverty and an inability to penetrate into a formal system that requires a multiplicity of paperwork and connections, because this is the reason why we do not have the kind of results that we would like in terms of university graduates who are being able to find jobs, let alone you, standard 3, standard 5, standard 8 dropout, form 3, form 4 dropout. Heck, we've got college going women who are now in domestic worker positions or as factory workers because they can't find work elsewhere. What are the chances for this woman who is from an urban informal settlement or who has come from the countryside? If she's gone through the criminal justice system, chances are that if her mother was able, her mother would have taken those children even before she came out in order to be with them and to protect them while waiting for her daughter to finish her sentence. That is not to say that there aren't women and men who will be accepted by their own families. But they are very, very few. The larger majority, they do not want the association, or if you must, please be behind the kitchens and in places where we cannot be seen. And this is the nuance of stigma. Stigma is a big word, but consider, for example, that one of the ways to punish someone, in fact, to punish a child, we know, is for a parent, when a child is doing something, to turn their face away from the child. And we know from behavioral psychology that that child will do anything to regain just the attention of the parent. It's inherent in us. And yet as a society, we're okay to turn our collective faces and resources away from people whose greatest crime was selling 300 shillings worth of sweets inside a matatu without a license. Now, when she comes out, what then happens? Number one, like I said, she has to find her children, because children above the age of 4 do not go into prison with their mothers. We won't even discuss the ones under the age of 4 whose crime it was never, and yet who have done the time with their mothers, serving inside of a prison that does not cater for children, without a budget allocation that does not have a specific budget for the children who come in with their mothers. But for the child who is above 4, who had to be on the streets of Nairobi, or the streets of Mombasa, or Nakuru, Eldoret, Kisumu, any of the urban centers, what has this child done to survive? Where there are girls, if you notice, you see a lot of parking boys. Where are the girls? How come we're not seeing the girls? When you follow the answer to the question, where are the girls, all of you will find that we are doing to our children things that are so horrific, and that we are turning a blind eye to it, that these girls, so traumatized, so sexualized, that these boys because it's happening to boys as well. So traumatized, so sexualized, that by the time the mother comes back after only 3 months, she is unable to deal with these children. They now have another way of making money if they're unable to make ends meet. They know where to go. They know what to do. And the things that they are doing are things that no one, adult or child, should ever have their bodies subjected to. Now, when these ones grow up, please expect that we are breeding hardened criminals. And it's looking through this entire story of unintended consequences and thinking to ourselves in a pragmatic way, what do we stop being dogmatic about and sending people to prison, 3,000 shillings or 3 months imprisonment as an alternative, but 3,000 shillings or community service? Why? Because first of all, they remain with their children and therefore there is the umbrella of a parent. Number 2, they continue with an income generating activity. Number 3, within that community service, we're able to integrate those skills that you were talking about, upgrade the skills, and create a better, more skilled workforce. And number 4, always, as with universities, any other tertiary institution or any kind of training, provide the opportunity for those skills and training to translate into an economic activity. Now, when we have done all of this, we will have solved one of the biggest problems within our criminal justice system, which is the criminalization of poverty and the continued stigmatization of those who are poor. And number 3, the breeding of criminals. Because the scenario that I have painted to you is not just for girls and women. We have sons and men as well. And they too will be going through the same trajectory. But for us at Clean Start, we thought, where do we start? We start where we can with what we have. We're women, we know this experience. We're lawyers, we know this system. Let's begin to tackle it from there. And thankfully now, we're seeing doctors, we're seeing forensics experts, we're seeing the DCI, the Chief Justice, the judiciary, all sorts of players coming in and saying, okay, we're listening. What can we do collectively? And that's what this Beyond the Bars conference is about. 400 women coming together, all formerly imprisoned, all women leaders coming together. They're the majority in the room for starters, not the NGO types, not the, Kizungu Media and catwalk types. No. Them, and then finally saying, listen, this is where we're not getting it right. We collectively are not getting it right. And therefore, that's why we're producing people like me. So how could it be different so that we all get it right and we create a system that works not just for us in Kenya, but we're back to that place where we are the SI unit for the continent and beyond on how to deal with this issue.
All right, so Maxwell, I'm going to come to you on the conference shortly. But first, before we move on from this, Teresa, your response to women have it easier.
I think to add on to the fantastic picture that Renee has painted for us of who this woman is and what their trajectory is like, I'd like to add some statistics onto it to understand these women who we're saying have it easier. We've done a study and we invested on understanding what's the access and administration of justice for women who commit petty offenses. And the evidence shows that 90% of the women who are taken to prison are the sole primary caregiver of their family. When that woman is taken into prison, the statistics also go to show that on an average, they have between 3 to 4 children. The statistics also show that 65% of those women in prison, their children are under the age of 10. So those children really need their mom at that particular time. Now, when you've separated this mom from her children because she was arrested while loitering because she didn't have employment, or she was arrested selling sweets and many other petty offenses that take these women in the hundreds behind bars. And I would say that indeed the study did prove that justice is biased against the poor. That's 70% of the women who are behind bars earned between 100 bob to 300 bob a day and fined 10,000, 100,000, and this is a woman who was making 100 bob to 300 bob. How can she afford that fine or that bail? So this woman has gone behind bars, left her 3 to 4 children who are under the age of 10. Imagine the life, day to day, of that woman behind bars every single day, knowing that those children are all by themselves, the trauma that this woman goes through. She then leaves prison and comes out worse than she went in. And mind you, 65% of these women are youths below the age of 35. Never had a decent job because of the high unemployment rates in the country or lack of economic opportunities. So she comes out, and as a woman, she has no food, no rent, has no clue where her children are, is now an ex-con. Her education rate, I mean, she had dropped out of school, she is illiterate, and even if she had gone through school, could never find a decent income. The first thing that woman has to do, look for her children, who, as Renee has said, have been through hell and high waters. What those children go through, we cannot begin. We need an entire session just to talk about what children of incarcerated parents go through on a day-to-day basis. Today, the parent, single parent, who will be convicted today, those children tonight, we cannot begin to explain what will happen to those children tonight and their journey as their mother tackles the imprisonment journey. So once the woman finds the children, she then has to move away. This is real life. The 400 women who were gathering together want to say to the world, want to say to the society, this is what we go through when we're subjected, to the harsh criminal conditions just by trying to fend for our children. She has to move from that place because she can no longer live in that area because of the stigma. The woman who just came from prison, the thief. And we do not want her anywhere near our families, near our children, nor her children coming anywhere near ours. She then moves to a new area and has absolutely nothing. Going back to which home? The majority of these women come from very poor, marginalized places, disadvantaged. So there's no one who's waiting for her. And that's why Clean Start comes in to say, we are the women who have been through this system. We understand the pain. We want to do it differently. But we totally understand we cannot do it alone. We need all players on the table to hear us out, to value our experiences, and to listen and consider the reforms and the changes that we need, especially when it comes to petty offenses. So women do not have it. It's actually even worse because the trickle-down effect to the children, we have a generation that's coming up of millions of children who have been subjected to that criminal justice system, invisible, forgotten, but very soon those children will talk.
Right. Maxwell, perhaps you could give us a bit more detail about the conference. From what I've heard from Teresa and Renee, the women in the room will not be Kizungu Mingi and Kato, boardroom level type thing. These are people who have gone through the justice system and therefore are able to provide insights from the users of the system, that perspective. So a lot of issues have come up, including a punitive penal code. I think one of you talked about it being a carryover from a colonial era. So who else is in the room?
So first, let me say this invite is to everyone who can participate, and if they go online, there are many options you can get to participate, either coming in person or logging in and streaming in. But now let me talk about, apart from the 400 women, and I like the way you've put it out, that this is getting the person creating the product to make sure that the product meets the need of the user, because for a long time that has not been happening. But like Renee said, we're also glad and excited about what the CJ is doing in terms of the penal code and these other things. But now let me talk about the people we want to be on the table. Faith-based organization, like Renee said, one of the things about faith is that God calls us to show mercy. to stand and speak out for justice. And I think one of the biggest player is always the faith-based organizations, community churches, mosques, and temples. So we want them to come in. We want to have the same conversation. We want the non-government civil organizations to be on the table, because again, we want to be sure what we've been prescribing, if it aligns to what these women are talking about. Like Teresa said, sometimes we think about this person who is being incarcerated and we forget the children. So there's something Clean Start keeps talking about, that there are children serving, children?
Not their crime.
Not their crime, yet their sentence. Because these children are innocent. But like Teresa was saying, the mom has been arrested today. She was selling sweets in the bus. These children now have no one to take care of them. So we want the government also to look at this, because in other jurisdictions, we have the government taking charge of, these children. The mom has been arrested. Before we take her in, what are we going to do with the children? So we have the police, we have the NGOs, we have corporates, because corporates also have a place to play. But most importantly, I want to call upon every Kenyan, because sometimes, Olive, we think this is not my issue. This is Teresa's issue, until it affects you. And that's why there's a lot of stigma and trauma, because we never, some of those cases we are talking about, vagrancy, things that you don't expect to be arrested for, are the things that, you encounter and find yourself behind the bars, and your life is changed and transformed. So stigma stands from there. So I would like to invite all of us as Kenyans, because this affair is for all of us. It's not just for the civil service. It's not just for the lawyers and the judiciary and the police and those who are affected. It's actually an issue that affects all of us. And that's why Renee was talking about, where these young girls. We can see the boys, but why are the young girls? And since we are responsible for the community, someone said that you judge a nation by how they treat the children. And I think this is one of the best ways we can deal with helping our children grow in a safe environment and a community that helps them become who they're supposed to be.
So this is the 30th of November and the 1st
yes,
of
so the
December.
conference will be on the 30th November and 1st December from 8:30 to around 5 p.m. All of us are invited. They can check us on our website, btbafrica.org, where you'll get the schedule and how you can participate.
All right.
At Kasarani Stadium.
Kasarani Stadium.
Kasarani Stadium, yeah. On Thika Road.
Okay. Renee, I'm worried after listening to Teresa about the children. Really worried. But does Clean Start Africa help? Because you've talked about from at the bars, right, to beyond the bars. And you have projects within the prison system itself, right?
Yes.
So are these mothers able to provide for their children even while incarcerated? Does your program take that into consideration?
And that's a great question. And this is the point when those who have been through the system need to talk about the system. Teresa.
My goodness, that's an incredible question, because that has been one of our cries as the women who have been through this system. We know that first and foremost, what took us in there primarily was tethered towards providing for our children. Now we're behind bars and limited to providing for those very children. We are working and continue to advocate. So one of the reasons why the Beyond the Bars Africa Conference is happening on the 30th and the 1st of December, and these 400 women are coming from across the country, is to represent women who've been through prisons across this country and the experiences they've been through in those prisons, because we are here in Nairobi talking about the few prisons in Nairobi and its environs that are very well resourced and okay, but we're forgetting about Lodwar, we're forgetting about the very far off Kapenguria, very far off prisons that are nowhere close to what we have here in Nairobi. And we want to make sure that the woman in Nairobi, what the woman in Nairobi gets is the same as what the woman in Kapenguria, what the woman in Lodwar in prison gets, because their children are the same. So one of the reasons, one of the panels, one of the discussions that will be happening at Beyond the Bars is how can we effectively ensure that when a woman is behind bars, she's not only taking the skills that you talked about, leather and all the other skills, But even in Lodwar, that woman is able to earn some income and be able to effectively provide for her children. That has been one of our key pains and one of our key issues to bring up on the table during this conference. So, of course, we have invited all key players who would be able to make this possible. And we keep saying that in addition to me being able to make some income and come up with an arrangement where some goes back to prison, some I earn, and some I'm able to use while I'm in prison, because that's possible. That arrangement is possible and it's doable. It has worked in other countries, it can work here. While that is said and done, I am able to leave prison with some capital to go help me begin my business, because currently that squarely lies with us, the women, to provide for ourselves. And the burden is huge. We're talking about hundreds of women across the country. Clean Start cannot be able to do it by themselves, and we really applaud all other key stakeholders like Clean Start who contribute to make reintegration possible. But there's so much more that needs to be done, especially with the criminal justice actors joining hands as allies to make that work. Because if we begin that process within the system, it will become very easy for the reintegration piece to happen. And let me say this as Maxwell comes to answer your question. Yes, Clean Start has put in this effort to bring all these 400 women from across the countries. Those are the ones that have raised their hand and said, I want to be in the room. I want my voice to be heard. But that woman in Lodwar, as much as she wants her voice and to be seen and for her voice to be heard, she probably doesn't even have the transport to come and attend that conference and have her voice heard. And that's what I like about Maxwell saying. Someone in Lodwar could say, I'm going to support you to be at that conference, to contribute your affairs and how you'd like to see justice effected for other women in Lodwar, and so on and so forth. So anyone who'd love to support these women to participate so that they can then go be ambassadors in their counties where they're coming from, please do join hands, as Maxwell has said. Go to btbafrica.org and support these women to be the advocates that truly they can be if only they're given the opportunity.
All right, so I'd like us to make final remarks when when the show comes, when the show, what is that called, bumper goes up, what is it you want to leave people with, Renee?
It's possible, it's necessary, it's urgent, and it's us. But we're going to have to do things differently. This is that call, to have listened and to have decided, actually, this is something that I can do something about, or to turn away and to allow the suffering, the abuse to continue and act as though there's nothing we can do. Once you've heard, you can't unhear it. The only invitation to you now is what action you're going to take. Join us at the Beyond the Bars conference and beyond the Beyond the Bars conference to make and be part of the change that we need to, for the individual to touch her and her children, because that is the difference between life and death, and then to the ecosystem, to create something that hasn't been created before so that we can have a future that has nothing to do with the sordid past that we are now living today.
I know you talked about religious organizations, civil society organizations. Maxwell, this was you.
Yes.
And then you have the justice players. How do corporates and the business community, educators and academia, maybe corporates and business community in terms of employment, I'm guessing, but educators and academia? I'm just curious about that one.
Fantastic, because first, one of the research that will be presented by Professor Sungi from USIU, there's some research did with some participants from Clean Start, is about how we treat these children and what we can do. So we actually need academia because we want these policies to change. We want the systems in this nation to become a tool that is conducive to help us reduce some of these things that will lead to recidivism and help our children grow and be protected by this law, because sometimes it feels like the law is against people, especially those from marginalized community and those who are poor. So research is very important, and that's why we want the academia to participate in as well. We also have individuals, because only there is nothing that is small. In where I come from, we say even a button can count, right? So we want them to log in and just see there are many opportunities and places they can play a role in. Like Teresa was saying, we have these 400 women who want to come, but only if this lady is struggling to provide food on the table. Sometimes I wonder if it's possible for them to sacrifice 3 meals for her to come to Nairobi and participate and get her voice heard. So even individuals from all walks of life can participate. Schools, it's important for even schools to participate, because we are the leaders tomorrow. These are the people who are going to do further research to the research that you already have and the one that we are talking about being presented on that day. Right. So the invite is to all and sundry. Everyone who can hear our voice, please log in on btbafrica.org and see where you can participate in.
All right, Teresa, your last remarks?
The closest to a problem are closest to the solutions, even though farthest from the resources and most often demeaned and left behind. The women have organized themselves, and they are asking the Kenyan nation, hear us out, listen to us. Come, let's collaborate. Let's answer them. We've let them down for way too long. Be it the education system, whose supply and quality is not equal for all, healthcare, whose access is also not equal for all, be it economic opportunities. They have been through hell and back, and they have rebuilt themselves and saying, come join hands with us and let's do this better. So let's extend the hand to them.
All right. So I want to thank you for being here, and I hope after the conference you can come back and then and tell us what was canvassed and what was agreed on, and so that we know these are the targets, and so we need to keep an eye on this and this and this. I have had in studio this morning Renee Ngamau. She is a global board member, Amnesty International. Always a pleasure, Renee. We also have Maxwell Kehara, who is the chairman of the Beyond the Bars conference. Good to have you here as well. Teresa Njoge, who is founder and CEO, Clean Start Africa. Thank you so very much for being here. We are discussing a clean start, essentially second chances beyond the bars. My name is Olive Burrows. I've been sitting in for Winnie Lubembe. Keep it NTV.
We've got unbeatable shows for the whole neighborhood to choose from.
I can have my happily ever after.
So stay connected to DSTV this holiday season to make the best entertainment yours. DSTV, it's your moment.
My name is Stephen Gitagama. I'm the CEO for the Nation Media Group. I would like to see Africa as a continent that has eradicated poverty. I want to see a transformed continent where we can actually move from one country to the other. We have one language. We have a borderless environment. Kusi, through the Nation Media Group, has a capacity to bring the best brains from all over the world to discuss, to ideate, and provide solutions to the problems facing the continent. I will be part and I will attend the Kusi Ideas Festival in Gaborone, Botswana in December, from 7th to 8th. See you there.
Now this week we focus on technology. Just what's the state of its deployment in agriculture on the continent, and just how can it be used to transform the sector?
You see, we are living in an era where everything has been transformed. So agricultural transformation or agriculture in general has not been left behind. And we believe if we adopt some of those principles of transformation, farmers will begin to embrace the new